I'm waiting. It says we are live, so we must be
Are we
live.
live yet?
Yeah, I think so. George. So, good evening. Good evening. That's the best Bela Lugosi person you're going to get. Welcome to This Week Unloaded. And I don't even know who these people are. They just showed up. They wandered in, and I can't get rid of them. So, who wants to introduce themselves first, you strange people? And let's start with the guy that has a B up there. It says his name's Buck. How are you?
I'm doing good. Glad for the invite.
Yeah. And then next, we got some guy, G2 or something. You want to introduce yourself here and tell people who you are?
Thanks for the invite. It's G23. Sometimes I do a show on Saturdays.
You do live shows? Wow. And we got No. Is that Dr. No? Is this a James Bond movie? What's going on here?
No.
So introduce yourself, man. Come on.
No. Yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Please buckle up and enjoy the ride.
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. There's nothing you can tell me that I do not already know. There's my Goldfinger impression. All right. And next we got a J.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for the invite, Rich. How you doing this evening?
Yeah. I guess okay.
Okay.
And my wife was just telling me there's something. I don't know. She saw somewhere that said that they voted to disband. They actually voted to disband the police in Minneapolis. I don't know if it's true or not.
There's like 5 or 6 cops sharing the same thing.
Yeah, she said there's 5 or 6 cops that she knows that are sharing that on, I guess, on her Facebook page.
I have cop friends over the country and what about it.
Anyway, so who we got out there so far? Well, 2 of you are in here, so you don't get mentioned. But we also have D10s and G-Webs out there. All right.
So is everything okay, Rick? Or Rich?
Yeah, everything's fine, I guess. I'm just.
Yeah. You're not in distress, are you?
No, if I would have my camera on and you would see me with a cup from Starbucks.
Okay. Just checking, buddy.
Yeah. Well, if you ever need to talk, Rich, you know.
See who I hang. See what I got. And these are my friends, guys.
Hey, we're here to support you.
Friends.
What was the line James Caan had in El Dorado? I have a wealth of friends. Whenever they would start picking on him in the movie.
With friends like this, you definitely don't need enemies.
No respect, I tell you. No respect.
Where's Gary and Kingpin when I need them? Jeez.
Ain't seen
smart. They're
Kingpin
not
for
here.
a couple weeks, man.
Yeah, he's been busy. I sent him a text a couple of days ago. He's been real busy, he said.
Yeah.
He might have fell in love.
With a Burger King drive-thru girl?
Maybe.
Yeah, he loves them napkins, man. Anyway, for those of you who have been following the show for the past few weeks, we've been on a Wild West Guns binge here. We did a bracket, and a few of the panelists didn't know anything about the guns that were on the bracket. So we're going through and basically doing an educational series on guns of that time period. If you go back a couple weeks, we already did one on the pistols. So if you haven't seen that episode, go back, and for those of you who are interested and maybe not as knowledgeable about the guns from that time period, go back and watch. We started with cartridge firing guns. We didn't go into the black powder guns, and they were black powder, but we didn't go into the cap and ball guns. We started from the advent of the number 3 Smith & Wesson, which was a very good gun. They lasted for a long time and went through different iterations over the years with that top break action. All the way into the 1900s, there were variations of the number 3 that were still being produced in various forms. And last week we talked a little bit about the bullets that were used and whatnot. This week we're going to talk about the rifles. So let me go over here, let me bring up my screen share. It was working before we went live. Let's see if it still works. So are you guys seeing the screen share?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Okay. I think Buck went to go eat, so he might not be able to respond right now. But you're seeing it, and you're on your phone, right, Rob?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Okay, good. So which ones do we want to talk about first here? We can talk about, do we want to go with the single shots first?
Whatever one you were given the panel.
Well, we didn't have any of the single shot rifles on the bracket, but we could talk about them because they're interesting too in their own right. Most of them are similar. Like all these Sharps rifles, they're basically the same action and everything. They're just in different calibers and lengths and whatnot. And then you have some which have the special sights, like this one here, a small Betsy rifle. It has that aperture sight on the back, which you may recognize if you've seen the movie Quigley Down Under. He used Tom Selleck in that movie used a Sharps rifle. Well, they didn't quite have that front sight on the originals. That's more of a modern target sight on the front. But that definitely would be the style of sight that would have been on the rear. These were what you would normally see your buffalo hunters using. You see in the westerns all the time where the buffalo hunters are using Winchester rifles. They really wouldn't have been using those because they weren't as powerful with cartridge. Most of your buffalo hunters would use something. Oh, darn it. I love when that happens. Let's go back over here. All right. Where is it? 4570. Some use 4570, but then you would have them where I know they have the higher caliber ones here. I've seen them. Yeah, like this, like the 45 120 would be like the top most powerful caliber, I believe.
$1,900.
Yep, they are expensive, man. But look how beautiful rifle that is. That rifle is just beautiful. It doesn't have the rear aperture sight on it, but you could. That's not hard. That's an easy modification to put on. Just bolts in right. I wish that picture would stay big, but they don't.
Now, is it common for guns of this era that have that front sight blade?
Yeah, this would be
kind of reversed. It looks like it's reversed from a modern firearm.
Yeah, that's the standard sight that you would have had on these old Sharps rifles on the front there. They said the one on that had the aperture, that had a more modern target style front sight. This would actually be the front sight that you would have seen on the old rifles. And then you would still have had the aperture sight right in this area. That's an easy modification. You can buy those and put them on the rifle yourself as an aftermarket piece if it doesn't come on it. But these were your typical big game rifles. This one here could be used to hunt anything from bear, on the North American continent to elephant and rhinoceros, hippos on the African continent.
Now, it has an adjustable rear sight right there, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's an adjustable rear sight right
yeah.
there. That's your typical like buckhorn style rear sight. But those the Creedmoor sight, that's what they were called, the ones that would be back here. Those are more accurate because that gives you windage and elevation on it. Whereas this just gives you elevation for the most part. These ones might give you windage too, but for the most part, that style sight just gave you elevation adjustments.
Looks like the sight we're looking at here might be a bit more durable. That other one where,
Yeah, that other one was, that was your precision sight. There were modifications to those where you can actually mount and dismount that sight so you wouldn't damage it in transport. But those were, like I said, those were
two triggers.
Yeah, it has two triggers. You pull the front trigger, and then to set it, like you would cock your hammer, pull that front trigger to set the rear trigger, and then the rear trigger is like a hair trigger. You just tap that trigger a little bit, and it goes boom.
That's weird.
Now, you'll see that on a lot of precision hunting rifles from that era, and even into the 20th century, you'll see that on the high precision rifles. And your like your bore rifles, like a 4-bore rifle, which was an African hunting rifle that was used for elephant a lot. That was a very common rifle. They would have the same kind of trigger system.
So that 45 120, are they referring to that being like 45 cal off 120 grains of powder?
Yeah, basically that's what that amount. That's what.
So that's almost double 4570.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, those will knock down a buffalo with.
Dude, that'd knock your shoulder down.
Yeah. Well,
you guys ever
powder? This was black powder. This wasn't smokeless, so it's not going to have quite the same kick as what a smokeless powder weapon would. If you put 120 grains of smokeless powder down an original one of these, you're going to blow the rifle up.
Oh yeah, but still, that's a heck of a round right there. That is a lot of even black powder right there.
Yeah,
because 4570 is going to do about anything, and 45 120. Wow.
Yeah, you're looking at a rifle here for that time period that had an effective range over 1,000 yards for that time period. This would be your 6.5 Creedmoor of that era.
Now, if I was belt fed, I'd be all over
it. Yeah, lever action.
Yeah, that round was too big to be in a lever action.
Yeah, that sure is a pretty rifle right there. That checkering kind of seems a little modern on it. The foreend.
No, they had checkering back then.
It's got a odd look to it with the rest of that rifle, but it's a beautiful one.
Yeah, that's period correct checkering, and that checkering would be expensive. That's an expensive upgrade right there on the original rifles.
Well, I just mean with that case color like that, man, that would be nice if that was like fancy engraved or something instead of just woodsman checker. Yeah.
You got to remember, again, back then, checkering wasn't all that common.
Also, are this website here, these guns, are they like period correct then?
They're period correct, but some of these can actually use smokeless powder, depending on who makes it. This one is this is a Chiaffa.
Metal backstrap. Oh man, that thing's got a kick like a mule.
Gee, it weighs 10 pounds.
Yeah, they weren't light. They were not light rifles by any stretch. Yeah, but man, they were beautiful. It's got a 34-inch octagonal barrel. See if anybody's saying anything out there in the YouTube chat about that one. GWeb says Glocks are also so high precision, so they have a double trigger too. I don't know. I don't remember ever seeing a Glock with a double trigger.
They have double triggers, Rich. There's the one it comes with, and then there's the one you have to buy and put in
Oh
it.
yeah, that's true.
Double sights too, right?
Yeah, quad sights because you had to buy them in pairs. Let's see what else do we have here. Then you got this, the Sharps Cavalry. This is an improvement of one of the rifles that would have been used again during the Civil War era. This one here. This one's what, 4570? Yeah.
So it would have been case hardened like that back in the day.
Yeah, they were. They
Oh,
had
yeah.
case hardening back in the day. Case hardening, just like today, would cost you more, but it was the most durable was the case hardening. The coloration actually comes from the hardening process for the metal. It's kind of like Damascus steel. How Damascus, the way they fold it, gets that pattern in it. With the case hardening, it's the way they harden it that gives it that color. See, this one doesn't have the checkering like the other one did. It's got the same style rear sight.
Yeah, and it's got like a barrel band instead of an end cap.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's pretty, man. I mean, I really like that. That looks nice.
Single trigger.
Yep, that's a
Yeah.
single trigger. It's not as high a precision a rifle. This, like, I mean, this one is a copy of a cavalry rifle. This would have been a contender with the Springfield trapdoor. It's got a 22-inch barrel.
Still 10 pounds.
Yeah. Well, all the rifles back then were heavier than what they are now.
Man, that looks like a fun gun. Look, 39 inches overall, 22-inch barrel, heavy.
Yeah.
With that, but that foregrip's so close up there, you know what I mean? It's built like a short gun up front and then has a barrel on it. That might be a fun little gun.
Yeah, remember, this was made to be shot from horseback.
We'll see it would work for a motorcycle nowadays.
And you can buy scabbards for rifles or shotguns for on your motorcycle.
Yeah, your quad runner, or hell, that's a good golf cart gun right there.
That'd be a good side-by-side gun.
You lost me at single shot.
Well, single shot, remember, this would have been back when, for some reason,
Yeah.
they decided a single shot was more efficient than a lever action.
Well,
Yeah.
think about it, no. Single shot would mean it's New York compliant.
Yeah, it is New York compliant. It is a single shot. It doesn't have a high capacity magazine, Rob. There's your rifle, man.
It's not New York affordable.
Well, not certain New Yorkers.
Come on, $1,400. You got that in your back pocket right now.
Hey, look how beautiful
And it's not a Glock.
Yeah. What I have and what I can spend is usually two different things.
Yeah, look how beautiful this is, man. That is a
It's
beautiful
nice.
rifle.
But it ain't $1,300 nice. Not to me.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Ooh, I bet it is. I bet in
Oh, yeah,
person,
it is.
that case hardening keeps it from rusting from all your drool. I guarantee you, I mean, I don't have $1,400, but if my dealer had one of those, I'd have it on layaway.
Uh-huh. Well, you could always have your dealer order it in and then put it on layaway. Now, here's your standard cavalry style. This is the way the cavalry would actually got them right here. If they would have won the competition against the Springfield.
Okay, what's the difference in this one and the other one? Why does this one cost more?
Look at your rear sight on this one.
Oh, okay.
And then it's got a little bit more precise of a front sight.
Oh, so it's got a $200 sight on it.
Yeah, basically. And the barrel band's different. Stuff. Yeah, it's the same length barrel. It's also lighter. It's a pound lighter. And this one's a cutter fully too, so that could be it too. Different brand, different price range. Cutter Solis their rifles tend to be a little bit higher than what the Chiappas are. They're just a little bit better made than the Chiappas. I think this one looks like the hammer's also case hardened, where the other one, I don't think the hammer was case hardened too. I think the hammer was just blued on the other one.
What do you think the going price would be on an original like that?
Oh hell, it depends on what condition it's in. But even for
$25.
even for one that's not in good condition, you're looking at this. You're looking at more than this. I've seen them ones that are, really, really good condition go for upwards of $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in auctions, depending on condition. So when you factor that in, if you want something like this and you can't afford an original, $1,500 is a hell of a lot cheaper than the original. And there were only so many of these made too, so you got to keep in mind of the originals. So it's really hard to find an original. And they're beautiful rifles. And these are made to go out and shoot. These aren't wall hangers. Trying to see if they got the Quigley. I think they have the Quigley style rifle. One, basically what he had in the movie. Sharp specific. Because he didn't have a 120 in the movie. I think he had a 45-100 in the movie, if I remember correctly. I thought they had one that was a replica of it. Yep, here it is. This has it as a 120 though. But in the movie, he used a 45-100. He didn't use a 45-120. But yeah, well, we already saw this one. So. But yeah, that's just basic. Again, it's missing the rear sight though. It doesn't have the Creedmoor rear sight on it. What's interesting about the Sharps rifles, the ones that were issued during the Civil War, that were still cap ball style revolvers. I mean, not revolvers, rifles. Some of them, where you see where the patch box is right here, this is a holdover from the muzzle loading rifle days on the stock here. This isn't a muzzle loader, it's a breech loader. Some of the Civil War era ones, that was a coffee grinder. You could use your rifle to grind your coffee. I was looking at, I don't think they have one that has the coffee grinder in the stock though. So I'm looking to see, I don't see one. That was like a cool feature, was the fact that you could grind your coffee with your rifle.
I'll just stick to my 50 caliber black powder.
Maybe. I wonder if they got it in the black powder. I wonder if they got them in the black powder with the coffee grinder in the stock. Probably not.
Now, is that something you put the coffee in and twist somehow, or you just bash it with the stock?
No, they had an actual coffee grinder. You would pour the coffee in as you were grinding it. You would grind up the beans.
Yeah.
Hey, Rich, what's that Richmond Carbine in satin right
Here?
there? Next
This is
to
one
it.
of the ones that was used by the Confederacy.
No, the short one, the carbine one he had. That looks pretty cool.
And come back. This one here?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Richmond Carbines. These were one of the rifles that was used by the Confederates. Because remember, they would use whatever they could get their hands on. That was one of the ones that they would have had.
I kind of like that. Has black powder.
Yeah, this is a muzzle loader. What caliber is it? It's a 58 caliber muzzle loading rifle. This one made by Chiappa. 25-inch barrel. 41 inches overall length. This would have been one that would have probably been used by the Confederate cavalry. Unlike later cavalry, around the Civil War period, cavalry was cavalry was more like mechanized infantry today. I'm sure Rob knows what I'm talking about when it comes to mechanized infantry. You would ride your vehicle to the battle, and then you would get out and fight. Basically, cavalry in the Civil War was basically the same thing. You would ride your horse to the fight, get off your horse, and then fight like infantry. And it was just easier for a horse to carry the shorter rifle. The Union cavalry, they could fight from horseback more readily than the Confederate cavalry did, especially when they came out with the the Spencer the Spencer breech loading rifle, and the Spencer carbine, which was a lever style rifle that had, if you remember when we were talking about it during the bracket, you would load the rounds through the back of the stock. So when those two rifles came about, the Union cavalry became more of a fight from horseback, as well as the ride your horse to the fight and then get off your horse kind of that you would see more often during the Civil War, because they could fire more shots from horseback, and it was a lot easier for them to reload when it came to the Sharps carbine than it was for the Confederacy, who was stuck with muzzle loading. That was a big advantage for the Union when those two rifles came about. Yeah, this would have been something that the Confederate cavalry would have been stuck with the duration of the war. If they were fighting from horseback, they were using their revolvers more so than they were their rifles.
I can't help but compare some of these. I know there's just, the historic value and things, but I look at these and I see like a Phillips screwdriver versus a cordless drill nowadays. Like, man, I'd only be buying it for art's sake. These prices are too high for me.
And these Enfields here, those are British that would have been used by the Confederacy as well. It was these coming into the country that they were trying to get past the blockade. This is one of the reasons why they had the blockade of the South, the naval blockade of the South, was to keep these from coming into the country for the Confederates to use, along with other supplies, obviously. And these were pre-Civil War here, the U.S. percussions. This is what would have been used. 1840s through the 1850s. Some saw service in the Civil War, but that's because they were just pressed into service because they were already in inventory. Once they ramped up and had the Springfields in the north, that was it. And some of these also saw service in the South because they still had the armories and stuff that the South would have captured from the Union when the states were seceding. A lot of these are what you would have seen in the hands of the Confederates. It's like for the most part. The Springfield, of course, like this would have been the standard rifle of the Union during the Civil War. More of these were used in the Civil War than any other rifle on, specifically on the Union side, but also, because of the hodgepodge that the Confederates were using. So here's the sharps that the cavalry would have been using on the Union side. Again, this was you would load a paper cartridge. You would cock the hammer back, open it, put your paper cartridge in, close it, cap it, and fire. Much, much faster than having to use a ramrod and reload what the Confederates had for their cavalry. And a lot easier to do from horseback. I don't see the one that had the coffee grinder in the stock.
I think that's cool. Coffee grinder. That's pretty awesome in my opinion. So
That was
coffee's always a little taste of home in some sense, as bad as it may be, but with a little bit of sanity at times.
Yeah, they don't have They don't have ones with the coffee grinder. That sucks. That would have been cool to show you guys. But yeah, they actually like.
Is there any other guns that had something like that? I mean, I never heard of a coffee grinder built into a gun, but
No, that's the only one I
anything
know
else?
of. That's the only one I know of that had the coffee grinder.
I'm sure now there's probably some attachment for an AR that you can open a beer bottle with or something. But
Oh, I'm sure there probably is.
but coffee grinder's pretty cool.
Yeah.
To see that like in a survival rifle or something like that, or backpacking gun or whatever.
What's that on the screen right there, man? Sniper
Which one?
rifles?
Yeah, these would have been your basic rifle with one of the first style scopes. So yeah, these would have been used by sharpshooters and whatnot during the war. There's when you go to the Civil War Museum, the National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, they have a fake tree in the one spot, and you look up in the tree and you see a Union soldier with one of these style rifles. Any other questions about these before we move on to go back to where we were talking about before we got sidetracked because of the coffee grinder?
Is there, I don't know if it's even a thing then, but is there like an MOA with something like this where, you can expect somewhat of a range, or
Yeah,
were they rifled?
Yeah, they were rifled.
Okay.
You can expect around 3 MOA out of one of these. I mean, they were precise enough for what they needed them to be. They were battlefield rifles and whatnot. And the rifling back then wasn't as good as rifling today. 3 MOA was a very good out of one of these, and the longer the barrel, the farther it was going to shoot. And the maximum effective range on say the Springfield, I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with you. But you could hit somebody at a few hundred yards with one of these. Now this one here, this was a smoothbore. You can see there it's a smoothbore musket. But this is one of the 1842 models. In 1842, they also had them in rifle. And these would have been similar to what would have been used in the Mexican-American War. You would have seen these being used. Texas's War of for Independence from Mexico, you would have seen these kind of used. Maybe a little bit older than these ones.
The David Crockett gun?
Yeah.
Apparently those didn't work too good.
The early Indian Wars would have seen these being used. Everybody thinks
they have like one of the first air pistols back then that you could fill up with an air tank and fire so many rounds around that time, same time frame.
Yeah, well, that was before that. Lewis and Clark took air rifles with them when they went on their trip to the Pacific coast. That would have been before this. And those rifles, that air rifle that they had with them was powerful enough that they took deer with it on their journey. That sounds crazy, right? When you think that today we think air rifles, you have people that mostly are going to think it's a kid's BB gun. But even today, there are air rifles that you can hunt with. You can hunt big game with an air rifle. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's a first thing that comes to mind when you hear air rifle. But yeah, I'm sure you could, especially with the technology these days. So
yeah, they have air rifles listed in calibers.
Yeah, there are 50 caliber air rifles. That's a big pellet. So we done with these rifles. We can go back to the others.
Question on those scopes. What was the glass that was used in that? I mean, do you know anything about the?
I'm not all that educated, I guess you say, on the scopes. I know they were extremely fragile. You have to be very careful with it.
And I assume they'd probably fog and things like that.
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean, they didn't have like the technology that they had in the early 1900s to where you could vacuum seal them and everything and put a gas in there to keep them from fogging up. Again, these were very rudimentary. As long as this scope is, you might have been a 4 power.
Well, did they have like
in there
sights, iron sights on that as well? Like on top of the scope?
I don't.
Just in case it was fogged or shattered or something like
looks
that.
Like there's something on top, but I can't tell what, or if that's just the wood there. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know the rifle probably did still, because I don't think they would have took the sights off because of how high they sit above it.
Probably not like a quick detach system of any kind, I'd assume. So,
yeah, as high as that is, you might have been able to look under the sight and use the standard iron sights. Kind of like how some of the AR-15 risers have where you can look underneath the optics in your sight.
Well, how
would those brass pieces be like the focals adjustments or something like that?
Yeah,
see how there's one like 3/4 of the way down.
See how they're positioned. You got one back here, and then you got one up here. My guess would be that's where they would mount the lenses. Like I said, I'm not an expert on the optic itself here. I know they were very rudimentary compared to what we would have today. You can see the adjustment knobs and stuff. You wouldn't have all the adjustment like what you would have today on a rifle. You would have these if the equivalent adjustments that you would have, this would probably be 1 MOA per click instead of like quarter MOAs and stuff like you have today. So, for the time period, these were great to have. You just have to be very careful with them.
They kind of look like a top piece up there might twist off where you can change the glass in it.
That's a possibility. I mean, if you could probably, if that would untwist, you could take that off. And that might be the purpose here too, because where they got the brass here, that might pop out and could possibly replace your glass if something were to happen to it.
What the weight on that? Those ones are. You know, what's the scope weight? You know, I wonder what that metal's made out of.
Well, they would have been a steel tube if I remember correctly. But they were extremely hard to make and they were expensive. You didn't see a whole lot of these being used. Most of your sharpshooters would still just use the Creedmoor style sight because those were more affordable than what this was. Again, if you forget what the Creedmoor sight was, I know I saw one that had it. Where'd it go? Thought I did anyway. No, maybe not here. The Creedmoor sight was the one that we looked at on the other rifle earlier. When it goes on the grip here, that would have been your more common precision sight. These were, like I said, these were extremely expensive for the time period, and they were very fragile. So you didn't want to take one of these out in the field very often. You know, you wouldn't see your standard trooper carrying one of these. Again, fragile and expensive. I think we covered pretty much everything on the light powder, except for these. This would have been what you would have seen during the American Revolution as far as a rifle is concerned. Little trivia, Kentucky rifle, that's actually a Pennsylvania rifle. Kentucky stole them. These were a Pennsylvania rifle before
Dang
Kentucky
thieves.
was the thing. These got to be named Kentucky rifles because of people like Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett and people like that. And so because they used them so much and they were popular in Kentucky, and they made a little bit of changes to the, like this here is different than what you would have had on the actual Pennsylvania rifle, but this originally would have been a Pennsylvania rifle, not a Kentucky rifle. And there's been a lot of bad blood between Pennsylvania and Kentucky over the years when this happened, because you would have people from Pennsylvania, no, that's a Pennsylvania rifle. Kentucky, no, it's a Kentucky rifle. So there was some disagreement over the naming of the rifles. But technically speaking, these are Pennsylvania rifles, not Kentucky rifles. I just thought that would be an interesting little side note on these rifles here. And we still got other designs. Here's your this would have been another one. This would have been what you would see being carried by your scouts. And notice, Pennsylvania, it says right here, Pennsylvania rifle. Looks just like the Kentucky rifle, it just doesn't have the fancy brass. And these are, again, they got that double trigger system. First trigger sets the second trigger. Your first trigger basically acts like a safety.
Is there no price on that one?
They don't have any available. There's none of these available either. These were a later offshot of the Kentucky/Pennsylvania rifle, as was this one. Again, you notice the double set trigger. First trigger to set, second trigger to fire.
Seems kind of hinky to me. Just me, I guess. I don't know. I mean, if you're riding up on a situation horseback, you're not sure.
Well, remember,
what's around the corner. Do you set it back?
Well, this again was a precision hunting rifle.
Okay.
This wasn't your survival rifle. This was a precision hunting rifle. You would
And I guess anything you can train with or whatever, but
Well, you got to
just if
imagine
it's
the regular trigger back then was probably horrendously heavy compared to modern days. So that light
True.
action double trigger there, that's probably the best thing you could do for accuracy on that gun.
Well,
And if you
not
had to
really. You got to
take a
remember
shot real quick, are you going to be able to get one off? Say you're out and you're about to get attacked.
The trigger generally on this style rifle, like if you go back to the Kentucky and Pennsylvania rifle, if you'd had the standard rifle, not the precision hunting rifle, it wasn't a super heavy trigger because these were all single action. So they had a relatively light trigger. The thing with this is it gives you can pull that first trigger and get ready to shoot, and then that still takes off some of the tension. They would take it from being, say, a 4-pound trigger down to a 1 to 2-pound trigger on that rear trigger once you're ready to fire. You sneeze on that thing after pulling the first trigger and it's going to go off.
Now, can you just pull on the second trigger?
No. Okay. You have to set it with the first trigger. They said before, this would be like almost, I guess you could be like the equivalent of a safety today, kind of.
That's a Glock dingle dongle?
Yeah, yeah, something like that. So, I think we covered these pretty good. The black powder, which, again, all these would have been black powder at that time period, but they specifically call these ones black powder. These are cap and ball. And then the Kentucky uses a flintlock. So that's an even, you would have a piece of flint that would go in the hammer, and that would hit your pan right here. Like I'm pointing out with my fingers, but yeah, you see right in front of the hammer, you see the piece that looks like it would flip up. That's because it does. What happens is when you cock the hammer back and you fire it, you would have when you loaded it, you would put a little bit of powder in that little pan, and then you would after cocking your hammer to half cock, you would flip that up with a little powder, put that back down, then cock your rifle to full cock, and then when you pulled the trigger, the hammer would come down, it would strike that piece that sticks up, the flint would scrape against there, cause a spark that would go down into that pan and ignite your powder, and then there was a little tube there that little spark and the ignited powder would go down, and that would ignite your main charge, and that would set it off. Which is why a lot of times with these old flintlocks, you could stand there holding the rifle for 30 seconds before it would actually fire after pulling the trigger.
Man. That's kind of stuff.
The percussion cap eliminated that issue.
Hey, that's all we needed to beat the British.
Well, not everybody was running around with these. A lot of people were still using Brown Bess muskets, even on the American side for the most part. The militias had these. The regular Union forces, they were using the same musket that the British were.
I just figure moisture must have had a heck of an effect. If you slid or fell, did the powder fall out of your little pan? And it's just like there's a lot of extra variables.
Well, the muskets worked on the same principle. You would have the same basic design there.
Pain in the butt, man.
Yeah. But the thing about these, a musket, you might have had an effective range 50 to 75 yards, maybe a little bit farther. This, you're looking at 200 to 300 yards. That is a big difference on the Revolutionary War battlefield. There were many a British officer that were taken down by one of these. Yeah. Few have put out there. The British used a musket that used a bullet that weighed 6 bullets per pound. We invented the Pennsylvania rifle that used like 70 bullets per pound and had a longer range by 2 to 3 times. Could load faster, shoot more, and shoot accurately from further away. Yep, exactly. Like I said, there were many a British officer that found themselves on the wrong end of one of these rifles. The principle being,
I never realized they had that much range to them.
oh yeah, Kentucky rifles had it for the time period had a really good range. Kentucky, Pennsylvania rifles. Let's go back over here. Okay, so I think we pretty much covered the single shot ones pretty well, right? And we did a side trip on the black powder, which again, they're all black powder, just for clarification, but they specifically list them here on this site as being black powder. So we can go up here to the cartridge rifles and get to where we would be talking about the Winchesters, the Henrys, the Spencers. So you guys remember these were the ones that were on the bracket. This is just a novelty gun. Basically, they took a buntline style 1873 and put a rifle stock on it. These were not something that actually existed to my knowledge, but it is cool looking. So we'll just take a quick look at it. I mean,
I don't think it's cool looking. Put a regular grip on that thing, and yeah, it's not bad. It's like the Batman gun or something.
It needs
Joker
one of
gun
them.
or whatever.
It needs one of them flip up peep sights on the back.
no. Yeah, right here. Yeah, put a Creedmoor sight on there. There you go. Definitely put a Creedmoor sight on that. And away you go.
Yeah, it looks like a bounty hunter gun.
Looks like a bounty hunter gun from Star Wars. Anyway, now we get back on topic, and we start with the Henry. You know, this.
That's a gun.
That damn Yankee gun that you load on Sunday and shoot all week long. The ammo capacity on these was 15 rounds of 44 Henry.
That almost looks like the Henry rifle that Clover Tack did a video on in 3030.
I don't, no, not quite. That was a modern Henry. Not the same company. These would actually have been manufactured by Winchester. But Henry was the guy that developed it. Benjamin Tyler Henry. They used originally used a rimfire 44 caliber bullet that would have been a heeled bullet design. Basically, think of a bigger 22 round, and that's what this shot. And you see this piece right here? This here's your follower. When you loaded it, that would be all the way up here. And as you fired it, it would go down, 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 because that would be what was pushing your rounds. By the time you got where your hand was, you had to do what was called the Henry hop. Otherwise, you would cause your rifle not to feed, because the little tab there would hit your hand, and you would stop it. The Henry hop was just pulling your hand away and moving it in where it was behind that, so that it could keep moving.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was improved on the 66 Winchester. They did away with that and put a wood forend on here. And you didn't have that problem no more. So, speaking of which, here is the 66 Winchester. Another improvement. You look on the Henry, just like with modern Henrys, it loaded up here. Right? You would load it through mag tube itself.
Tube fed, yeah.
Yep. Well, they're all tube fed.
Well, I mean, tube load.
Yeah, it was a tube loader. Whereas the 66 got rid of the Henry Hop issue and added the Kingsgate. So it would have been the same caliber, and then eventually, and then along with the Henry, would have been upgraded to where it would have been in 44 American, which was the same basic bullet, but instead of being rimfire, it was a center fire. But same caliber, same diameter and everything, same powder charge, just went from rimfire to center fire. And even the 44 Henry round didn't go out of fashion because there were so many of the original Henrys and 66s that were in 44 Henry that the 44 Henry lasted in production all the way till the early 1900s. I think it was around 1920 or so when they stopped producing that round where nobody was making the round anymore. So it lasted a good long while. And I believe the 44 American went out about the same time period because, then you had the 44 Russian and then 4470, which we'll get, or not 4470, 4440, which we'll get to when another rifle. But yeah, that was basically when you went from the Henry to the 66 Winchester, and you can see just by looking, you can see what differences were made, the main upgrades that were made between the two rifles. Yeah, the addition of the handguard, the Kingsgate.
Yeah, that Henry rifle looked like it would get a little warm on your hands.
Yeah, that was one of the complaints. Besides the follower, that your hand would get hot holding it after firing so many rounds because of where it was at. A lot of people would end up holding it back here because it would get too hot up here. And that's one of the reasons why you have the wooden forend added on the 66. The 66 is very similar to the Henry, but you have three main changes made: the addition of the Kingsgate, the addition of the forend, and getting rid of the external follower. So
Good improvements.
Yep, those were the improvements that were made. And then we got this is what the rifle that was competing against both of those rifles. This is the improved version, but this is essentially the rifle that you would have seen U.S. Cavalry using as a repeater during the Civil War towards the end of the war. Instead of having a mag tube out here, like on the Henry, it had a mag tube in the stock. And your lever would be your trigger guard. You would pull that down, it would close it, it would load your round, eject your spent case, and then you would have to cock the hammer manually. Unlike with the Henry, the way the Henry worked was just like with the other lever actions. Your bolt back here, when you cock the hammer, would push back out here, cock your hammer. On the Spencer, you didn't have that, so you had to manually cock the hammer yourself. This was the competitor to the Henry, and for some reason, this was the one that was chosen for the U.S. Cavalry over the Henry. Not this particular one. I think it was 1861. I want to say, Spencer, that was chosen for the cavalry.
Do you know why it was chosen? It seemed like a metal tube, magazine tube might be stronger than the wooden.
Yeah, Lincoln was given a Henry, and he loved the rifle. He wanted the military to choose that, but basically there was some issues the military had with the rifle. One was the magazine tube. Yeah, let's go look back over here and look at the Henry. The magazine tube, because of the way the follower was stuck out the bottom, it had a...
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about with the improvement to this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Why they didn't stick with it? For the same reason they never went with the Winchester. They thought that soldiers would waste ammo with them. Even with the lessons that were learned with the cavalry using these during the Spencers during the Civil War, they still insisted that that soldiers would waste ammo because they weren't just shooting one bullet at a time, they could shoot 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 bullets, and it would go through them so fast because they would be shooting them wantonly and that whole nonsense. But the reason why the Henry wasn't adopted was one of the reasons they were worried that the magazine tube, because it had that slot in the bottom for the follower, would collect dirt and stuff, and they were worried it would cause jams. And they thought that the lever action on the Henry was fragile and that it could run into issues and stuff. So that's the reason they said that they didn't want to go with the Henry with the U.S.
Yeah, I can see that. I thought it was the other one versus the upgraded Henry at Winchester with the King's Gate and stuff. So
yeah. Whereas if you look at the Spencer, the mag tube is completely encased, and it basically is like your Sharps. Basically, it's your Sharps action with the addition of a mag tube for all intents and purposes. You would do the same thing, except for instead of this opening up here to insert around, it would do it automatically when you cock that hammer, and then you would, or not cock the hammer, but the lever, and then you would pull your hammer back just like you would with the Sharps. So that basically almost the same manual of arms as with the Sharps, only you weren't having to insert around. So that's why they want.
Hey, does it say how many rounds that thing holds? Since the tube, the tubes in the stock
I believe
there.
7. Go down and check. Yeah, 7 rounds. And I forget what caliber these were originally, but they didn't use the 44 Henry. They had their own caliber, if I remember right. So, but yeah, these were more robust, according to the U.S. military, than what the Henry was. And so that's why the Spencer was chosen over the Henry for the cavalry during the Civil War. And neither rifle was chosen after the Civil War. This rifle wasn't chosen. The Spencer wasn't chosen. They went back to using the single shot breech loader because they were worried that the troops would fire too much ammo wantonly and waste it. And, it is what it is, right? I think they were foolish, but another thing I think they didn't like was the fact that these were in pistol calibers. Whereas if you go to the Springfield, which we haven't talked about yet, we didn't talk about the Springfield yet. So let's go over and look at the Springfield while we're talking about the lever guns. Here we go. There's the sight again. Springfield trapdoor. These were in rifle caliber. These were 45-70, which the Army liked that caliber at that time period. So that's why they went with it. And you notice again, it uses a similar action to the Sharps and the Spencers. Instead of having a cap there, you would where the hammer hit. That would be where your firing pin was. Basically, that's why they went with this, because rifle caliber, and it was a single shot. And everybody that had been used to the Springfield, oh, not the Springfield. This is the Springfield. All these rifles being able to ask, it's hard to you get tongue tied when you're trying to go from one to the other. Everybody had used the Sharps rifle, was used to this style, so that's what they went with. Again, it's almost the same manual of arms as the Sharps rifle. Only instead of a paper cartridge, you would be putting in a metallic cartridge, and you didn't have to cap it. They had their reasons. I don't necessarily agree with them, but they had their reasons. where were we? Over here. Oops. No, we were not there yet. And that was a modern. It was a more modern version. We were here. The 1873. This is what would be regarded as the rifle that won the West. I don't necessarily agree with that because you had a lot of rifles that would have been used in the West.
So I don't get off schedule.
My wife said, "Tell you good night, guys. She's going to bed."
Oh, good night. This is white lady.
The rich white wife.
Night.
These were, anyway, these were the successor to the 66. You can see there's some minor changes to the outside.
Yeah, that's a nice rifle.
Yeah. Same basic action. This rifle introduced the 4470. Why do I keep on saying 4470? 4440, otherwise known as Winchester centerfire. And it was a more powerful round. It was it wasn't a heeled bullet like what the 66 and the Henry would have used, and so it was more reliable. It didn't require the bullet to externally be lubricated like what the heeled bullets did. And it was just a good workhorse of a rifle. It was a little bit more robust still than what the 66 was over the Henry. The 66 was more robust than the Henry. The 73 was more robust than the 66. And a lot of these were bought and used during the West, but again, you had a lot of other rifles that were in use as well. But this would have been a popular rifle. They would have been an expensive rifle, which is why you still had people running around with the Henrys and the 66s and not going out and buying these, because this was an expensive rifle when it came out. So they were a nice rifle for the time period. So what was the weight on one of these, out of curiosity? Remember, this is the rifle length, even with a 19-inch barrel. These look considerable. There's the weight. About 7.5 pounds. So you see it's getting lighter than what the Civil War rifles were. And what the buffalo hunting rifles of the era were. This is definitely lighter than one of those. Again, these were not available in 44 Magnum because that round did not exist. But they would have been in 4440, which was a good round for the time period. Let's see, where are we going next? Come on, load. Oh, the websites don't want to load. Well, while we're waiting for the website to load, anybody got any questions so far?
No, but I like that rifle. That's a nice rifle. A 44 Magnum lever gun, that's a lot of fun.
Made this one. This looks like it's going to be a while. This is a new birdie. Okay.
Yeah, no questions, but yeah, it does look like a nice rifle.
Come on, you stupid website.
Did your wife shut off the internet?
Well, if she did, I wouldn't be here still. This website sometimes just gets to be stupid and doesn't want to load. like it.
Do they have that gun chambered in 357 by any chance, or is that just 44?
I don't know. This specific one here is only in 44, but I'm sure you probably could get it in 357. I didn't even see you sneak in, Pat. How you doing?
Oh, not too bad. Just got done with dinner and kids and all sorts of fun stuff today. So actually I had a day off, so it was great.
Try over here. Now, the next one on the list is 1876. Oh, there we go. See, this website can be screwy sometimes. This essentially was the first of the Winchester lever guns to be loaded in a rifle caliber. Don't know if this is, but yeah, you see this one. They would use it to hunt bear or bison, aka buffalo. So this was. I'm trying to remember what caliber it was. Here it says okay, it does have the original calibers: 45-60 and 50-95 were the two calibers that this was in. That they have, I believe it was in a 38-70, if I remember right, as well. But yeah, these would have been your first of the lever guns with an actual rifle caliber.
What type of rifling was used? Any idea?
What was that, Rob?
What type of rifling was used? Like, what was the original rifling that people came out with?
What kind of rifling? And basically just where they took and rifled.
But meaning like they stuck I forgot what they call it.
Yeah, the rifling process wasn't much different than what it is today.
Okay, it's like a piece of metal with the shape in it, and then they force it through.
Yeah, they would force it down the barrel.
All right. Yeah, I can't think of the name, but
yeah. Again, pretty rifles. Essentially, these were just scaled up 73 that was able to fire a more powerful, what would be considered a rifle cartridge.
Yeah, my grandpa had I think it was the remake at the time of the 1876 Centennial rifle. And when Kansas had their bicentennial, they put a gold coin on each side of the buttstock. I talked about this one a little bit here a couple of weeks ago, but it had two solid gold coins on each side of the buttstock commemorating Kansas Centennial. So, but that's what it was modeled after, of the 1876 Centennial.
That's cool.
Yeah, I was up at my cousin's last week, and I should have taken some pictures of it, but I completely forgot. It is a beautiful gun, never been fired, never been touched without gloves.
The next rifle on the list is an interesting side note to history. These never made it much in the large-scale production because this was a rifle that was made by Colt. This is designed by Andrew Burgess. And the reason why it never made it into a whole lot of production numbers is because Winchester was like, hold it. We agreed not to make revolvers, so you don't make a rifle, or we're going to make a revolver, Colt like threw up their hands, were like, "Okay, you win," and the rifle was discontinued. They made about 3,800 of them in the rifle, 25, almost 2,600 of them in the carbine, and that was it. From all accounts, these were a decent rifle. They would have gave Winchester a run for their money, but because of the agreement that was reached between Colt and Winchester, these went the way of the dodo pretty quickly.
Well, but if somebody's got an original one of those on their hands, I'll bet that's worth a boatload.
Yeah, probably.
I was going to ask what that would be.
Yeah, I couldn't give you an answer. I've never seen one come up for auction myself, so I couldn't even tell you how much it would have went for if one did.
Yeah, I like that one too. That's real pretty, nice and smooth looking.
Did you cover any of the Henrys with octagonal barrels tonight there, Rich? Or
We talked about the Henry. We talked about when we got to the lever guns. The Henry was first one we talked about.
okay, I figured so. So
Yeah. What time is it? Okay, got to move on here. Well, here's an interesting little gun too. Let's see if it pulls up. These are your. This is a pump action. The pump action actually originated on a rifle, not a shotgun. This would have been around 1890 or so, and eventually these would go on to be popular with carnivals too. Caliber, they got this one in. You get 30. You get this one in a 357 45 Colt. So that's what that comes in. The carnival guns would have been in 22 rimfire.
yeah, and I'm not sure if it was one like that or what it was, but my great grandma, and I just barely remember this gun. This was her bedside gun because she lived out in the country by herself for a lot of years after my great grandpa died. But she had a gun that looked an awfully lot like that was side load, pump action 22. And it just looked like one of the old gallery guns, but got it. Like I said, I was pretty young when I saw it, but it looked an awful lot like that one right there. I always thought it was really cool, but never got a chance to handle it.
If I remember right, if you go over to Forgotten Weapons, I believe Ian has a video on one of these rifles. So if you want to know more about
I'd love to have.
you can go over to the Forgotten Weapons and check out the video over there on them.
I'm pretty sure they had a little exhibit on those at the Fairfax NRA Museum as well. A whole little gallery section. It's pretty neat. Almost looked like you could play it, but but you can't, obviously. But it's one of the old setups they had.
Yeah, if you go to Kennywood in Pittsburgh, they have light operated versions, and this is the model that they use for the rifle on it. But it's a light activated version of the old carnival target shooting gallery, where you have the targets that would knock down and stuff, and they'll set themselves back up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, back when they actually used to use ammunition in the gallery.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the one at Kennywood, it's a light activated, but it's like shooting. It makes the noise, and you get the recoil effect in the gun. It uses little solenoids in the gun itself to produce a recoil effect, like if you were shooting a 22, which is cool. And it weighs about the same as what the original rifle would have used. And again, this is like the model that was used for the guns look like these.
So did you actually have to pump it to reload it to get it to shoot again then on the laser, on the light?
Yeah, that was the one thing you didn't have to do. You didn't have to cock it.
Oh,
Yeah, I know that would have been cool too, right? But they didn't have that feature on it. This flight activated thing's been there for years, so they might not have had the technology when they first installed it to do that, you know?
right. Because that would have been cool if, in order to shoot again, you had to like actually pump it to reset the solenoid in there, so that way you got the recoil.
Yeah. That shooting gallery there has been there as long as I can remember. I think it's been there before I was born. Every year I would go to Kennywood, it was there, and it was there still when we took our kids a couple years ago. Yeah, that's an interesting little rifle too. That was a side note back then to that time period.
Those come in different lengths then, Rich, on the barrels?
I don't know. I can't really answer that one.
Man, that is a sweet looking gun.
Yeah. Nowadays, you can go to Wildwood, New Jersey, and shoot from the boardwalk at people that run around and try to hide behind nets. It's a little different, but with paintball guns.
Yeah,
but it's still kind of enjoyable.
Yeah, you get like the laser tag places too that you can go to and do that.
But if the guy hides behind the net, just wait, and the other guy will yell at him to get out there and start running again.
Yeah. This one here, this was your 1886. I believe this is the gun, if I remember correctly, that started the partnership between Browning and Winchester. I believe this is the first one that he worked on for Winchester. And again, this is a rifle caliber. He made changes. He made some changes to the action to improve the action on it. And other than that, it's a beefed up version of the 1876, and it came in different calibers, different models, as you can see here. You got your standard Old West, profile Winchester, and you got more of hunting profile ones as well. And then you got the takedowns. And, this one, of course, is a completely modern because they didn't have rail sections for optics back then, or muzzle brakes. So yeah, this one's definitely not an Old West gun.
Hey, Rich.
Yep.
Hey, on that takedown one over there, yeah, right there in the middle. Now, when you break that down, you got something in there that will stop the cartridges from falling out? Or would you have to reload it all?
I would assume you would have to reload it. I don't know if there's some. I honestly don't know the answer to that one, Buck. I would assume you would take it apart when it was empty. Otherwise, you're going to have the cartridges start shooting out of there.
Now, it looks like there's a red cap, or that might be the follower or something.
Yeah, that's probably the follower. Yeah, I would. Yeah, my guess is that it would have to be unloaded for you to take it down.
Yeah, Browning was doing takedowns before takedowns were cool.
Yeah, you figure the need for something like that has probably been out there a long time in a sense. So especially with travel back in, you're talking like prior to vehicles and things like that, to the common person having a vehicle or whatever. Not sure what year that is there, but yeah, travel was a lot different back then.
Yeah, that's for sure. And if you were like a buffalo hunter or whatnot coming from the east, and you had one of these and the takedown, you could store it in your luggage a lot easier than if you had it all in one piece. You can take it apart, put it in a case.
Out of sight, out of mind. That's likely to get stolen or something too, probably.
Yeah.
Man, I made a mess all over myself. Horrible. Right in the crotch too.
Oh man.
Yeah. One of them chocolate ice cream cones that you buy from the store. It's got all that chocolatey stuff on the top. Half of it ended up in my lap. No good.
Yeah.
Sure, that's what it is.
I was at my friend's house when I was younger, and I had a 2-liter of Pepsi I was drinking from. I started falling asleep. Next thing I know, I got Pepsi all over my crotch. I'm not going to tell you. I'm sure you can figure out what it looked like happened.
Yeah, not cool. That's like going to the bathroom when you're traveling or something. You turn the sink on, the water sprays out half the time, and like you got to turn that on slow and stand back, or else it sprays all up over your crotch. You come out, you're like, I swear I didn't piss on myself.
Yep. All right, we need to move along here because Midnight's going to be sending his links out eventually. It's getting to be that time where he starts sending them out. Now we got probably the most popular lever gun, regardless of Snob in his 1894, that was produced particularly at this time period. And again, it's another one designed by John Moses Browning, where he took the action improvements that he put in the 1886 and adopted them to the 1873 and came out with the 1892 Winchester. This one has been used in more westerns than any other rifle produced. If you see a Winchester in a western, it's more than likely this one right here, especially with the big John Wayne loop.
Yeah, actually, that rifle was made super famous in the series, The Rifleman.
Yeah, the big loop Winchester was first used, I believe, by John Wayne in a movie before The Rifleman even. So I mean, it was.
Yeah, it was, but it really got really popular when The Rifleman came out. I don't know if y'all remember that series or not, but
John Wayne carried one of those in a lot of little westerns he did, starting with Rio Bravo. An interesting little fact, I think we've discussed it on the channel before. Jimmy Stewart used an 1892 to win an 1873 one of 1,000 rifle, which was a special series of the Winchesters that were put out as a marketing tool back then. One of 1,000, those were all hand polished and everything. They were the finest 1873 rifles ever produced. In the movie Winchester 73, Jimmy Stewart uses a Winchester 92 to win in 1873. And keep in mind that in the movie Winchester 73, the Winchester 73 had just come out. The rifle that the Winchester 92 that he was using was supposed to have been would have been in 1866. But he used an 1892 to win an 1873 in an era where the 66 would have been the most common of the Winchesters.
That's Hollywood for you.
Yes, it is.
Since we're talking about that gun, I'll give you a little factoid on the Rifleman. That gun was actually designed on the inside. They messed with something on the inside, so that way every time he cocked that lever forward and it came all the way back, it would automatically fire. He didn't even have to use the trigger.
That was a common thing that was done among gunfighters that carried a Winchester. You would basically wire the trigger back where it would slam fire, essentially.
Yep. But there is something that you can go in and do on the inside to make it do it. but I can't remember what it is. A buddy of mine knows how to do it. He wanted to do my Henry, and I was like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, no.
It'd suck when your buddy picks up your gun, not knowing.
Like these came
Right.
in takedown models. Yeah, the 1892 came in takedown models just like the 1886 did, and the only thing you didn't have, I thought, was the more hunting rifle style ones, like what you saw with the 1886, or it was 1886, yeah, the 86, because again, these were pistol caliber. These would have been your pistol caliber carbine to your hunting 1886 rifle. You know what I mean? 4440, that was a popular round in both the Colt and the Winchester rifles. A lot of guys would have the Colt in the 4440, and they would have the 4440 rifle alongside it in around the 1890s, and because they would carry the both rounds because they carried it. You know what I mean? It would be like having a 9mm carbine and say a Beretta 92 matched with it.
Yep, perfect pairs. Perfect pairs. Definitely less ammo to carry.
Oh yeah.
Not having to fiddle with two different ones anyway.
And there's something they actually call their one with the big loop the Rio Bravo. Because if I remember right, that is where the big loop first appeared, was in the movie Rio Bravo. I could be wrong, but if I remember right, that's where that big loop first appeared. They didn't actually use those in the West. That was a creation of Hollywood. Made for good action scenes in a movie, though, right?
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what, after firing one with the small loop on it and firing a lever gun with a big loop, I would definitely go with the big loop every time.
Let's go to this. Now we'll go look at this one's big brother. The iconic 1894.
Now you're talking.
This is the rifle that gave us the 30-30 Winchester centerfire, or the 30 Winchester centerfire, also known as the 30-30 round. The round that this rifle introduced with it is probably taken more deer other than a 22. Believe it or not, people kill a lot of deer with 22s. But yeah, this.
Shh, not supposed to talk about that.
These were a very nice rifle that is still produced to this day by the current iteration of Winchester. And believe it or not, these are actually cheaper than the actual current Winchester.
Yeah, but man, I don't know.